Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Convention of States, Indiana Live. The purpose of our broadcast, as we have always done, is to reach out to those of you in the state of Indiana and beyond, but to welcome you into the Convention of States organization here in Indiana. If you do not belong to our organization, hopefully this broadcast will give you some information and you'll determine that you are interested in coming in. If you're already in, then hopefully our broadcast will be of further education and information to you. Let me bring myself on the screen here, and so you can see me. My name's Dale Parrish. I'm the state director for Convention of States here in Indiana. And I want to welcome you once again to our broadcast. Our broadcast always is in two segments. The first segment will be a presentation that I will do covering the basics, what we call the basics of Convention of States. These are, well, it'll be informational as well as the basics. The basics are just a set of tenets that everyone in Convention of States learns and understands. It's what our organization and our movement is built around. Then the second segment is generally includes a guest, and once again we have a guest with us tonight, Paul Phillips, our legislative liaison and co-state director. Now, Paul and I, we're going to make a little change tonight. We're going to discuss a topic. Paul has been on the broadcast before and has talked about his story and his duties in Convention of States here in Indiana. But tonight, Paul and I are going to talk about a topic, and that topic is Runaway Convention. This is a topic that comes up frequently in our effort to further our movement, the fear of a runaway convention. So that's what we'll be discussing in the second segment. So what I want to do now is I want to get ready to get into the first part of our broadcast this evening, and that will be the basics of Convention of States. And let me get my PowerPoint all set up here, and I'm told to that I should use the slideshow option for the PowerPoint, so that it occupies as much of the screen as possible. And I think I've got it all set up there. And hopefully I haven't cut my audio off in the process. I've done that before. But anyway, let's get started with the basics here. Now, first of all, I want to advise you of the resources that we have available to us, not only here in the state of Indiana, but across the country. The main resource that we use in Convention of States is our website, and that is conventionofstates.com. This website contains a wealth of information about Convention of States, and on the back side of the website is a major database program that we use to administer our program. So, but anyway, this is where we go frequently. This is, if you're not involved in our movement as yet, if you haven't signed the petition, the first step you need to take is to go to this website, open an account, sign the petition, okay, conventionofstates.com. Now, embedded in that national website is our state website page, conventionofstates.com/Indiana. Facebook, we're on Facebook, Convention of States, Indiana. As a matter of fact, this broadcast this evening is coming to you through our Facebook page, Convention of States, Indiana. We have a YouTube channel, COS Indiana. Now, the YouTube channel is primarily an educational resource. We have a number of PowerPoint presentations on the YouTube channel. We have recordings of these broadcasts that we're doing are on there. And we're in the process of trying to get Paul's, our guest coming up in the second segment, Paul's podcasts. We're also trying to get those on the YouTube channel. And we'll talk a little bit more about his podcast in the second segment. We're on Twitter, hashtag COS Indiana. And we have an Instagram account set up. We're still in the process, still working on that one. Okay, our vision statement here in Indiana is to build a Hoosier grassroots community of citizens and legislators dedicated to the constitutional concept of self-governance. This is what we strive ultimately to achieve here in the state of Indiana. Everything we do is directly related to achieving this vision here in Indiana someday. Okay. Now, let me give you a few numbers about our movement here in Indiana. In 2018, we surpassed 30,000 petition signers, or 30,000 supporters here in the state of Indiana. We've been growing tremendously in the past few years, growing at about a 40% growth rate. Given that growth rate, we're anticipating and striving in 2019 to achieve 40,000 followers or supporters. So that's our goal for 2019. Of those supporters, about 2,500 have indicated that they're willing to volunteer if needed for any type of project or work. We then also have leadership positions, and we have a little over 30 people currently in leadership positions in the state. And if you have any inclination or any possible interest, perhaps, in looking at a leadership position, I would encourage you to go, here's this website again. I would encourage you to go to our national website, conventionofstates.com. Click on the menu selection, Take Action. Scroll down and look at the different positions that we have available. If anyone is of interest to you, open it up, read about it. If you're still interested, go ahead and make application. Now, you're not obligated in any way if you make application. But what happens when you make application, then your name pops up on a report that we get every day. And then one of us will be in contact with you to discuss your interest further. So as I said, we're always looking for leadership people. So if you have any interest at all, please go to the website, click on Take Action, and take a look down at the different positions that we have. Okay, let's get into the basics that we talked about. These are there are three aspects, basically, three tenets to Convention of States. And again, this is common amongst everyone in Convention of States all across the country. And that is the problem, the solution, and the plan. Now, we're not going to go into great detail this evening. This is just an overview. So let's get started and let's look at the problem. Basically, we think the problem is that our government is out of control, lacks the will and the courage to make and address some basic structural issues in our government. We're going to get into those very soon here. But this has been going on for decades. There's no one particular political party is responsible. It's been going on for decades, but it's become a problem, a serious problem with our federal government. Breaking down the problem, we break it down into three abuses, we refer to them as. Again, we're not going in detail here, but the first one has to do with the national debt. I'm sure you all seen this. We just surpassed $22 trillion in debt for our country. We just surpassed that mark. Nothing seriously is being done to address that situation, and we think that there needs to be steps taken and controls put in place to address this issue. The second issue, the second abuse, I should say, is what we refer to as the regulatory crisis. This has to do with our administrative state, which has become known as the fourth branch of government. Now, I know the current administration has been eliminating some regulations, but much, much more needs to be done. And plus, we need controls in place over the unelected individuals creating all these regulations. All right. And the third abuse has to do with state sovereignty, has to do with dual federalism, which was a concept when our country was founded, where the federal government and the states would share power. That's all tilted in favor of the federal government. We think career politicians play a big role in this power struggle. So that's the third area, the third abuse that we want to see addressed. Okay, what's the solution? Well, this is very important. This is what we're all about. Article 5 of our Constitution describes the two methods available to us to amend the Constitution. All right. The first one, we're gonna just briefly touch on each method here, but the first method is the one that's been used. The second method has never been used, and I want to stress here, we're not making this up. This is in Article 5 of the Constitution. Let's look at these two methods. The first method is, as I said, this is the method that has been used to date, and that's where 2/3 of Congress propose amendments, and those proposed amendment or amendments then go to the state legislatures for ratification, requiring 3/4 of the states, or 38 states, to ratify any proposed amendment for it to become an amendment to the Constitution. All right? Well, there is a second method, and that second method is upon the application of 34 states, which would be 2/3 of the state legislatures. Upon application, then a convention of states will be held, and at that convention, any proposed amendments that come out of the convention would then, of course, then have to go through the ratification process, requiring 3/4 of the state legislatures, or 38 states, to ratify any amendment. Once ratified, it becomes an amendment to the Constitution. So this is what we're all about. We want to call a convention of states to propose amendments to address the abuses in government that we see right now, the problem right now. And we also then hope that this will become a recurring event, not just one convention, but we're focused now on having this first convention of states for the purpose of amending the Constitution. Well, what's our plan to bring this about? Our plan is in two parts. The first part has to do with the application strategy. Now, I told you that 34 states would have to make applications.
Did you accidentally summon me?
I guess Siri wanted to talk to me there. 34 states have to make application to hold this convention. The applications have to be all the same. So what we've done in Convention of States is we've literally drawn up the application that we want 34 states to utilize in applying for a Convention of States. And then that application, it addresses three areas. It's referred to as the subject matter of the application. Number one, fiscal restraints. Number two, limiting power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits. Term limits for Congress and the federal judiciary. So that's what we're trying to do with our application strategy. The second part of the plan is mobilizing the grassroots. The grassroots being you, me, our state legislators, mobilizing the grassroots to bring this all about. And believe me, the grassroots is a major, major part of our organizational structure. Just to let you know, we're in all 50 states now. I mentioned earlier in Indiana, we just surpassed 30,000 supporters. Nationwide, we just went over 3.8 million. So we are growing, and the momentum is moving our way. The state of Arkansas just passed their application, and they became the 13th state to make application. So, and Indiana, I might say, is one of the 13 states. We were number 6. So we're a passed state. We've passed the resolution. So bottom line is we would love to have you join us. We need your help. So please, as I said, go to the website and take a look at those positions. All right, let me get out of the PowerPoint, and let me I'll send the PowerPoint away, and I'll bring our guest on, Paul Phillips. And where did he go? He's coming here. I know he is. There he is.
Hey,
hello,
Dale.
Paul. Hi. Let me get rid of the PowerPoint there. And all right, Paul. Okay. Now, once again, this is Paul Phillips. Paul is has a dual role, is our legislative liaison, and is also the or vice state director, however you want to say it. So Paul is our topic tonight that we're going to discuss. Paul, as you know, is a runaway convention. Now, Paul and I both have written about this, as well as, of course, many other people in our organization. But I wanted to show you, Paul, as I mentioned earlier, creates, and you're still in the process of doing this, right, Paul?
Yes.
Has a podcast that he creates, and they're called Free to Be Free. And what's the website, Paul, for that now?
freetobefree.podbean.com.
Okay, freetobefree.podbean.com. Now that's where they are now, and they will continue to be there. But we are also, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to get Paul's podcast onto our YouTube channel, and our communications team is working on that right now. But now, Paul, you have one of your podcasts, if I remember right, is entitled Runaway Fear, correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. And I just specifically addressed the topic of the myth of a runaway convention.
Okay. The myth, that's good. I should have included that word, but as I mentioned, there've been a lot has been written about a runaway convention, and this is, I might mention also that, of course, it's no secret that we have opposition to convention of states. And am I correct, Paul, in saying that much of the opposition, the underlying theme is the fear of a runaway convention?
Yeah, much of the opposition to us actually has three elements: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So it's those three things that are often raised, and it just doesn't have a basis in fact. In fact, in our history, going back from colonial times up until actually late 2017 was our last convention of states, there have been 40 convention of states. Now, none of these were amending conventions under Article 5, but of the 40 conventions of states that have happened in our history, exactly 0 of them have been runaway or have deviated from their stated purpose or the instructions that the commissioners have had. So when somebody brings up this fear of a runaway and it's going to go off the rails and do things it's not supposed to, that's something that has never happened before.
Okay. All right. Well, as I said, as you just heard, Paul's got a podcast out there called Runaway Fear that addresses the Runaway Convention. Now, I put together a PowerPoint presentation some time ago, and this is on our YouTube channel. It's called Firewalls, and the position I took was I identified what I called firewalls, 5 walls or 5 obstacles that would have to be breached in order for a convention to be a runaway. And of course, my point is that it's very, very highly unlikely that anything that could happen. But I thought we would kind of use these as a guide tonight to kind of take us through this very quickly. Once again, we are limited in time here, so we have to go quickly. But and Paul, you can help describe this as we go along. But the first firewall, the first thing that would have to be breached would be the application itself. And am I correct that it's the application that determines the subject matter of the convention? Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the application or reason that the convention is called is going to limit its scope. And for the Convention of States, that limited scope involves anything is fair game as long as it involves a fiscal restraint placed on the federal government, limiting the scope, jurisdiction of the federal government, or imposing term limits, as you mentioned in the introduction. So that is some controlling language that if there's anything outside of that scope that is proposed, all that has to happen at the convention is a member has to call a point of order, point out that the proposal is out of scope, and from that point on, it'll be dropped and they'll move on to the next topic.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, that's tradition. That's how every convention, it's that application that determines the subject matter of the convention. Okay. The next wall that I identify has to do with the rules. And am I correct, Paul, that at the convention, the commissioners that attend that convention, they actually set the rules for the convention, right?
That's correct. Once the convention is started, one of the first orders of business after selecting, a presiding officer, a parliamentarian, and so on, the first order of business then would be to establish the rules for the convention. And for the most part, we believe that the convention will follow Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure. This is a very thorough document that the majority of state legislatures follow. But there will be some modifications for the Convention of States. But when the Convention of States rules don't apply. Mason's manual will kind of be the backstop. And most of the commissioners attending the convention will be legislators, and they'll be very familiar with those rules of order.
Okay. Like you said, the rules will be determined, but there's a lot of publications and rules already published that can be utilized, or some combination of those. So we've covered now the application and the rules of the convention. Now let's talk about the next wall that would have to be breached. Would in fact be the commissioners or the delegates to the convention. And in that respect, now each state can choose their commissioners as they wish. Am I right?
That's correct. The commissioners will actually be agents of the state legislature, and as the principal agent relationship, the legislature will get to choose and instruct the commissioners. Okay.
And a state can send as many commissioners as the state wants to, right?
That's correct, but it's one vote per state, no matter how many commissioners they send.
Exactly. But the point is here, and let's use Indiana as an example, but the point I want to bring out on the commissioners is that the state legislatures will be watching these commissioners very, very closely. And so that any commissioner that strays from what their instructions were could be quickly pulled, replaced by an alternate. And if you would, Paul, now Indiana has already set forth requirements for their commissioners. Am I right?
That's correct. We have what's called a faithful commissioner law. And in the case of a commissioner who either votes or attempts to vote in violation of their instructions, the vote would be declared null and void. The commissioner would be removed and replaced by an alternate. And they could be subject to criminal prosecution and charged with a level 6 felony, which is up to a $10,000 fine and anywhere between 6 and 18 months in prison.
So pretty severe penalty if they strayed from their duties. So again, the point being that in order for a runaway to occur, I mean, the commissioners would have to be totally on their own, unlooked at, uncontrolled, for this to happen, and that's just doesn't appear to be logical that could happen.
That's right, and so the commissioner's instructions, in a way, interact with the application or the subject matter of the convention. Typically, in the commissioner's instructions, the legislator is going to restate the scope of the convention, but then they may go further and give their commissioners further instruction. But the commissioners are going to be bound by, I'll call it the least common denominator of the call for the convention and their commission. So if a legislature gives a commissioner authority to do something that is beyond the scope of the application, it's the application that will control, and they won't be able to act in that way.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now you mentioned the next wall that I had identified. You mentioned it just a minute ago, is the vote, and that is where each state basically gets one vote. It's one vote per state. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So now the reason this is important is that even though there'll be, let me get this one vote per state up there, even though there may be states there will be states there with multiple commissioners,